Welcome to Rethinking Youth Ministry, where each week we hope to raise the bar for youth ministry by asking questions, interviewing thinkers, and having real, honest conversations about what it looks like to lead the next generation. I'm Sarah Anderson, and sitting around the table today, we have Crystal Chang, Tom Chef Shunis, also known as Chef, and Ashley Bohens. And I want to get a 30-second blurb from each one of you about your job, how you got here, a little bit of your story. We'll start with you, Crystal.
Okay, so I'm the director of high school strategy here at Orange. And before that, I was a high school Spanish teacher for almost a decade. I served in almost every volunteer position in student ministry. And right now, I have a small group of 33 sophomores.
Wow.
It's not a small group.
That is not a small group.
That's a
Not a
ministry.
small
Like
group
nation.
at all.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice. Chef?
Well, my name's Tom Chef Shunis, or Chef, most people call me, unless you're my mom or Andy Stanley. And
What does he call you?
it's Tom.
Okay.
And you can call me whatever, but I probably won't answer. So 20 years of youth experience. I was a teacher and a high school principal for a season, a volunteer youth worker, and then a professional youth worker for the last 12 years, running a ministry. So had a great time with that.
Awesome.
And now what do you do, Chef?
Oh, that's
That's
a good point. Now I'm the director of student strategy here
Yeah, he
at
is.
Orange.
Yes.
Yeah.
Welcome. Did you say what you did already?
Yeah.
She
Great.
did.
Ashley.
Yeah, so I am the director of middle school strategy here at Orange. Before that, I was a middle school pastor. I was on staff. Actually, Chef was my boss for a period of time. I was
Best
on
year of
the
your life.
best season of my life was
Until
on
now.
the multi-campus team at North Point. Before that, I was a middle school pastor up in Baltimore, Maryland. And before that, I was a middle school health teacher, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, all of the fun stuff through puberty, and was volunteering in the student ministry.
Great. Well, that was awesome. I love the people listening, getting to know you guys a little bit better. So today we are going to be talking a little bit about middle school and high school students and how are they different? And I think the question we're really trying to answer is how do I address both middle school and high school students? Because a lot of ministries have both combined, and we've got a gap of about 11 or 12 years old to 18 years old. And that's a big challenge to have one person in charge of all of those ages and how to do it effectively. So that's the question we're trying to answer. How do I address both middle school and high school students? What would y'all say?
Well, I think the tension is legit. I mean, I know from a 6th to 8th grade, for the last few years, I've been trying to address that. The difference between a 6th grade boy and an 8th grade girl, I mean, that's
Miles
Big.
and light years.
different creature. So to say a 6th grade boy to a senior girl, all in the
Right.
same room, you're trying to say something for everybody. And I don't know if you guys would agree with this statement. When I try to address everybody, I feel like I have said nothing to anybody.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's so good.
Well, and I also, we were talking a little bit about this before off the air, but we don't necessarily all agree with how we would answer some of these questions. But I think that's kind of good. I would like to kind of focus a little bit on how we might have different answers to some of this. So if all of us had to answer the question, you had 6th through 12th grade in the room,
Yeah.
who would you be teaching toward? What would be your goal, your age, gender, whatever?
10th graders, obviously.
Obviously.
There we go.
Obviously, because they're the best. And
And there's no seniors there anyway.
there's no
No, I
seniors
shouldn't
there
say
anyway. They've already checked out. It's fine. It's
I know what you're
fine.
talking about, Chef. I don't know where you're coming from,
Don't get me
but
started.
Crystal, were you done?
Would
Yeah,
you say, would it be,
So you're teaching to the middle.
They're just my favorite.
teaching- oh, 'cause
I'm
they're your
teaching to my
favorite.
favorite.
Oh,
the
you're,
ones I like
so you're
the
teaching
best.
to 10th graders, would it matter boy or a 10th grade boy or a 10th grade girl?
Obviously.
Because that's what you're a smart group leader. Got it.
Clearly, you know what you're doing.
Got it.
Because clearly they're the best. And a 10th grade girl is like an 8th grade boy, so you get both.
Right.
True. I think for me, my first thought was I would talk to the 6th graders, because somebody who's unchurched would be probably at the 6th grade level anyways when you're talking about church things, spiritual things. So I think the lowest common denominator in the room is everybody's going to be able to understand what that means and what you're talking about.
Interesting.
And then you won't have 10th graders in the room anymore, and you won't have to worry about it.
True. But not because of the content, because the middle schoolers are there.
So true.
Let's be honest.
That's true.
I think we all teach to ourselves. We imagine ourselves
Touché.
somewhere in there, right? And we
Middle
do.
schooler.
I mean, it's why youth pastors who don't have a strategy or don't have a curriculum, they constantly talk about what they're working on to their
Right.
kids, and they miss them completely developmentally. So
Yeah.
it's important to have a strategy. It's important to step back and really think, okay, who am I talking to? Because if we don't stop and think about it, we're just going to talk to ourselves, probably at our current age, and we miss who we're trying to really
Right.
affect,
Right. Well, I think it's important to say there isn't like a right or wrong answer to that. Like
Yeah.
that's something I think we're trying to always figure out when it comes to writing the curriculum and figuring out small group questions and, topics, content, all kinds of things. We're always wondering how's the best way to approach it.
Because this isn't just a middle school, high school tension. I mean,
Right.
just like you said, a 6th grader and an 8th grader are very different. A 9th grader and a 12th grader are on different planets. And
And
so
a boy and a girl.
Boy and a
boy and a girl are
Right.
still on different planets
Yeah.
well into adulthood.
And this is kind of a side note, but I
Although
feel
the
like
boy's
we're always
longing to
trying
be on another
to
planet.
take into account, the social pecking order as well. You're making sure you're not just preaching
sure.
to
Oh, that's right.
a certain brand of students.
Right.
That's, just the popular kids or just, whatever. So anyway, all that to say, there's just obviously a lot of things to take into account when you're teaching to various age groups. So the question that we're asking is, how are middle school and high school students different, and how do I address both middle school and high school students? And we talked a little bit about last time about how sometimes making sure you're asking the right question is just as important as getting an answer. So do you think that question reflects what we're really trying to go after? How do I address both middle school and high school students, or how would you answer or ask a different question?
For me, I really think I would ask a different question. It's how do I address kids at every stage? Because I just think 9th graders and 12th graders are just as big a difference as middle schoolers and high schoolers.
Right. That's
Yeah.
a good point.
I think that's true. I mean, we have gone through we had a just 6th grade only program for a season, and then
Right.
7th and 8th graders. And I hear about churches who have 4th and 5th. And I think if I had all the money in the world, my next one would be 4th and 5th separate, or 5th
Yeah.
and 6th separate, and then 7th and 8th separate. That logic extends to a different ministry for every age.
Right.
I mean, you can take it that far, which isn't realistic for any of us. But the reality is, if you're trying to be effective, you've got to go where they are, and they're all at different places.
Yeah, I think like as a group, high school students and middle school students have an identity and they're different.
That's
But then
true.
when you dig in deeper, it's like you get to know them more personal. I mean, I remember, having a room full of students who are all 7th and 8th graders, I could know them as a big group, but I didn't necessarily know them separately and individually as 7th graders and 8th graders and find the words to define that.
And that's something that we really kind of maybe intuitively believed here at Orange when we started the Phase Project, which, if you're not familiar with what that is, we basically began a research project to discover what's different about kids at every age and every stage, because we all kind of thought that there's something different about them, but we didn't have the research behind it. And after hours that I cannot tell you of Googling in
Yeah.
our offices and reading books after books after books,
Getting teachers and counselors and researchers together.
all of that, having pediatricians come in and like 250 teachers of the year from across the country, they all kind of said the same thing, which was every grade is a different experience for every
Yeah.
kid. And you have some opportunities at each grade that you may never get again. And so you
Right.
have to address them when they're in 9th grade, because you'll never talk to them as a 9th grader again.
Right. That's a great point.
Right.
It's a short
And there are some things that you need to, the concept needs to move on as they get older. When we would teach about sexuality every March, and we would basically say the same things every year, and the conversations in small group would change from 6th grade to 7th grade to 8th grade. There were times we actually had a separate 6th grade leader guide or a separate guys and girls leader guide, because the conversation's going in different directions. And then we told the small group leaders, hey, if the conversation goes in, feel free to throw this, conversation guide over your shoulder and go where you feel like they need to go, because nobody knows them better than you. So,
Well, it seems like what you're saying is it could be that you address them the same or more similarly from the stage.
Right.
But the change is really going to happen when it comes to the small group
yeah.
conversation.
So I grew up in a church of 45 people, something like that. And so, for me, the small group leader, which was called a Sunday school teacher at the time, and it really wasn't a small group. It was much more rows than a circle, but it was 7 of us between 6 and 8, so
Right.
a small group, we maybe could have pulled guys and girls separate to go there, but you still need to have the conversation the best you can. If you can separate into guys and girls, that's best. If you can separate by grade in guys and girls, that's even better, and as your ministry grows and you move in that direction, I just think it's just wise strategically because they're so different as to what you said, Crystal.
So I grew up in a really small church as well. And we had a Sunday school class called the youth class.
Youth class.
Lucky me, my mom was...
Acronym.
That's right.
Standing for...
I wish that would be true.
The hope for eternity.
Lucky for me, my mom was the teacher. So when I joined the youth class at 11, it was ages 11 to 26.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
And listen, I learned some things in that youth class
did.
my mom wished I hadn't.
Yeah.
Right.
And never mind. You don't want to know that. But we had a lot of
Only the
conversations.
Phase Project had been
Only
around.
the Phase Project had told them that wasn't the best idea.
Well, let's talk about the phases a little bit because, Crystal, as the director of a high school curriculum, you're obviously going to have some input into that. And Ashley, your experience in middle school world. And then Chef has had experience in both. Talk to me a little bit about how you see these phases being different and the biggest changes that take place as they're moving from one phase to the next.
Oh, I love talking about this. And there are so many things I have in my head that I would love to share about middle school students. But just in general, sixth graders are asking, who do I like? Or I guess we could say it like, who likes me? Peer influence is so important. They will go to great lengths to fit in. Seventh grade is more about who am I? So now that I know who likes me and who I like, who am I? It's self-discovery. It's personal discovery. They're going to try things they never have before. They're going to get cut from the team that they thought they would make. They're going to learn things about themselves a ton in seventh grade. And eighth grade becomes, well, who do I want to be? Now that I know who likes me and who I like, I know maybe who I am a little bit more. Who do I want to become? Because I don't have to believe what my parents always said I have to believe. I can challenge questions. I can have doubts. And I'm going to look for a mentor or somebody further down the road to figure out what that's going to look like for me.
So I love this question because when I was in the classroom, every year I met with parents, and over time I stopped talking about my class and I started talking about what ninth grade is like and what 10th grade is like. Because for a lot of parents, this is a new thing, and their kid last year is not the same as their kid this year. And so when students were in the ninth grade, I would talk about how they're just looking for a tribe. They're looking for what group of people they fit in, and they're shocked that it's not the same people they fit with in eighth grade. So there's this crisis of my friends aren't my friends anymore, and all of a sudden they start trying on different styles of clothing, and they like different music, and it changes week to week because we're trying to find where we fit in the ninth grade. And that's a painful process. It's painful for parents. It's painful for kids. It's painful for me as a small group leader because I had multiple tribes in my group last year when they were freshmen, and it was like warring factions.
Yeah.
They were tribes who didn't like each other very much. That's just part of being in ninth grade. And then 10th graders are really asking the question, who am I? Not just in the context of in my family anymore or in my tribe, but who am I personally? And I love 10th grade. It's my favorite because that's when they start to own their own faith. That's when they start to make decisions based on who they think they are. One of the interesting things about 10th grade that we discovered as part of the Phase Project is that suicide rates begin to peak in sixth grade and they climb steadily. And the first time they dip is in the 10th grade.
Wow.
And what we found is that students who found their tribe in ninth grade are less likely to commit self-harm or to be in danger of suicide in the 10th grade, which I think is fascinating. 11th graders start asking the question, what will I do? What's my purpose? Based on what tribe I'm in and who I think I am, what are the decisions that I'm going to make, which is really great and dangerous because they're finally old enough to drive and to date, and they're making college choices. And then 12th graders begin to ask the question, what's next? And so it's interesting. There's this transition that happens every year. I call it the Christmas crisis. Kids change every year right around Christmas. And for 12th graders, the whole first semester is about, yes, I'm in 12th grade, celebrate, have fun, young and free. And then all of a sudden at Christmas, they realize what's coming next.
Right.
And they get clingy. And they start to need their mom, and they start to need their small group leader, and they start to just become really like seventh graders again.
Which is my favorite.
That's good.
So what I love about all of this is, the questions change.
Right.
I have had so many people, and I have never physically responded to somebody who said this, but I have mentally beat them down maybe, or verbally beat them down. But it's been, they say things like, I don't get a middle school curriculum. I just dumb down the high school curriculum, which
Terrible.
killing
sounds fine to me.
But I mean, it's not about less content. It's about a different question,
Right.
which strategically is great news for us because we can talk about similar things. In fact, we try to align our curriculums, middle and high school, for parents' sake. But the parents' conversations are going to be very different because they're asking different questions. Small group leaders' conversations are going to be very different. And so we can take a similar message and spin it in different directions. So depending on the questions that are being asked, not the amount of content kids can handle.
Well, I love that. I want to make sure we don't lose what you just said there, that we can talk about the similar subjects, but really the difference in the phases is going to show up in how we ask the questions with our small group leaders and our
how we
parents.
prepare small group leaders, how we prepare parents. I mean, those are different things that we need to think about.
Right.
And so it kind of changes our initial question, I think.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just you. You can't think just you. You got to think we or strategy or all those things.
And I think that's something we think about when we're writing curriculum. We're thinking, did we just talk about this subject? And, sometimes we do, but we have to remember that even if this student has been in this student ministry using this curriculum for the past 5 or 6 years.
And they came every day,
and
which they didn't.
Right. They're going to be hearing it differently.
Yeah.
As adults, we might be hearing the same thing over and over again, but as students growing and changing, it's going to be interpreted
We've
differently.
heard it many times.
Right.
But and we think, I've heard the story so many times. Many times it's the first time a kid has heard it. I mean, I used to fight with worship leaders all the time. We sing this song so much, I'm sick of it. I'm like, no, you sing this song all the time. Our kids come, what we're seeing is kids are lucky to come half the time to church. It's just basically what's happening. And so, you don't know what they've heard or where they are or how often they've heard it. So.
Well, and even if they came every week, I think 3 years is a long time in the life of a high schooler.
Right.
Whereas 3 years ago for me was like yesterday. As an adult, it just doesn't feel that long ago. But when I think about my own freshman year to junior year, it was a lifetime.
Well, do you remember how long Christmases were between each other? And now it's like, it's tomorrow. So, it's just different. Time speeds up as you get older.
Yeah. So you all have summed up really nicely the different kind of words that identify each of these different phases for middle school and high school. So the question that we moved from was, how do I kind of pastor these different phases? But the real question is, how do we help other people? How are we equipping the people that are in these students' lives to pastor them? So how would y'all answer that? How are we equipping small group leaders? How are we equipping parents to parent and to teach in these phases?
Well, I think the answer is we have to do that.
Right.
Because I know just sitting with a small group of girls, it's been really helpful to have an education background. I don't know what it would be like to sit across the table from a 15-year-old girl and not have that background. And the reality is most small group leaders don't come from that world. They have day jobs that probably pay them far more than mine did. And they have other things going on. And so I think we have to find some training opportunities where we talk about adolescent developmental stages with our volunteers and also with our parents, because those kids didn't come with a handbook.
Right.
And maybe not all parents have that sort of training either.
Right.
We actually created some free resources for middle school small group leaders. There are phase training videos, and you can get them on middleschoolphase.org. And what they are is it basically says like, hey, you're a 6th grade small group leader this year. This is what you can expect from your 6th graders. And it kind of goes into the phase information. It goes through each grade. We have one for 6th grade, one for 7th grade, one for 8th grade. And Crystal, they're going to be making them for high school, right?
Yep, those are in process right now. They're coming soon for high school as well. But in the meantime, you can go to justaphase.com, and there's already a lot of high school content there when you click on high school phase.
And I love when we train this. I used to do a breakout called the middle school brain or the middle school mind way before we had the phase thing. And people would come up to me and just be like, thank you. I feel so much better about myself, because they expect the world out of, kids, and they just expect too much.
Or they think, what the heck happened to that middle school?
Right. They come out, and then with a group of 6th grade boys, they were like, I only got them to concentrate for 8 minutes. To which I'm like,
great job.
Yes.
Five, bro. Like that
You
is,
win.
incredible. You are a superhero. So,
That's awesome.
it's just a realistic expectation as well as just digging into better conversation and asking better questions.
Well, and I love that because I think we would say in an ideal world, we would have these ministries separated out and a great budget for both of these ministries and great directors of the ministry and well-staffed, but that's just not the case for everybody. So the fact that we can help leaders train their small group leaders and train their parents to really work through the faith stuff and not just assume that churches are going to be able to do all that work.
And you've got to review it. There is so much information. We also have some books which you can recommend to your parents by every age or by every grade level. And so it's a book specifically about sixth graders for parents. And what are they called? The Phase Guides. And I don't know, Amazon probably would be my guess.
Amazon has them, phaseguides.com.
But I use them as a parent.
Yeah.
And I am professionally trained in this. I've got a degree in education, a master's degree in education, both where I took, all that psychological development stuff. And I have to remind myself, because my feelings are hurt, because I've got an eighth grader who, is, saying, and then I have to remind myself, this is exactly where he's supposed to be. Right. And though it hurts my feelings, he's on his way to independence. And someday I don't want him to live in the basement.
Right.
So that's a good thing. So,
and that's also, I'm not a parent, but those phase guides are really helpful for ministry leaders as well, because I know how many times parents came up to me and said, what happened to my middle school, or what is going on?
Right.
Is this normal? Should I be worried? And it gives me language and a reminder of how to help parents, like equip them, because I'm not a parent myself, so I can't speak from experience.
Yeah.
And everybody's always asking for a book. So
Right.
there's one
and
to give them.
they're very compact and they're
book?
digestible.
Yeah.
I mean, they're like, anyone can do it. Anyone can read them and get some good stuff from them. And I do love the fact buying ahead as a parent, so you know what's coming.
Right.
You feel like you're not in crisis mode by the time you get to the next age, but you're feeling more prepared for what's.
Yeah.
While we're talking about resources that are helpful, one of the things that I studied while we were working on the Phase project is the book Teen Stages by Elizabeth Miller and Ken Miller. It breaks down every age group starting at age 13. One of the things they said that really sort of blew my mind was the 13-year-old brain is rewired in the same way that a 2-year-old's brain is rewired.
Yeah, the reset.
And so they start to act like 2-year-olds and they start to push boundaries like 2-year-olds. And every time I've said that to a parent, their eyes go wide and it's like all of a sudden they understood what their kid is doing and it makes sense and their kid's not broken, which is awesome. Another book that we read as part of the Phase project is called Untangled by Dr. Lisa DeMauer, and it's guiding teenage girls through the 7 transitions into adulthood. It basically just made me understand my entire childhood.
Counseling.
Therapy. Look at that. A lot cheaper.
Can we all agree that the meanest creature on the face of the earth is a
7th grade girl?
There you go.
I love them so much.
I do too, but they're
terrifying.
But they are like a sponge, and you can influence them so much.
And they are the reason parents homeschool their middle schoolers.
That's true. That is true.
They're also mean. True.
Well, okay, I love this, that you guys are very passionate about the stages and the phases that you are working for. So, Crystal, if you had to pick what your favorite thing is about the high school phases, what would you pick?
Oh, gosh, there are so many. I think probably the reason I do this and the reason I volunteer to do this is that there's this transition in high school where they go from being a part of their parents' house and their parents' faith tradition and their parents' decision strategy to developing their own. And you get to see it and you get to walk them through it and you get to watch them fail their way through it and help them figure out what to do on the other side. And in 4 years, which is not a long time, you get to see an emerging adult, which is wild. So I just love seeing them come out on the other side of it with a faith of their own and a decision of their own and a life of their own.
Yeah. Chef, since you work with middle school and high school, you get to pick one for each.
I get to pick one for each. I think middle school, I love how moldable they are. Mm-hmm. I love just to tell them they're leaders and they believe you. Mm-hmm. And so it's such a great opportunity. I try to raise children in a way that they're going to change the world. And so I look at middle school as, my ministry is the same way. Is like, I'm not trying to keep kids from something. I'm trying to raise kids that are going to change the world or help, inspire kids to change the world. And sixth graders just go they just believe you. And it's an awesome foundational thing,
Yeah.
I love in high school just having those higher level conversations about approaching relationships. Like it's almost, a chess game. You're talking to a leader about, here's why that conversation went wrong and everything else. And having those higher level conversations where they understand my responsibility is to approach a question differently. It's not just that wasn't fair anymore. They understand they have a part in it as well.
That's good.
Such a fun conversation.
I love that. And Ashley, what would you say about middle school?
Well, besides the fact that they're free entertainment, especially middle school talent shows, I would say that I feel like you get the most bang for your buck in middle school. I think you can have so much influence because they're still open and willing to hear it. I remember sitting in a classroom in college and we read this poem called The Fence or the Ambulance or something. It was called like that. And it was about this town who there was this overlook on a cliff and people kept falling off the cliff. And so they kept putting this ambulance on the bottom that would get the people once they fell and bring them to the hospital. And so the town got into this huge argument. Should we put a fence at the top of the cliff or should we put the ambulance at the bottom? Kind of like the whole debate between being proactive versus reactive. And I guess I kind of look at, I'm not saying that high school ministry isn't proactive. That's not what I'm saying. But I think middle school is the last chance you get before they realize they really can make every decision on their own.
Yeah.
And so I would say that's why I love middle school the most.
That's a great answer. Well, we have just spent a lot of time talking about phases, and I love it. And I know we've just kind of scraped the surface, and there's a lot further we could go on all of that. But before we wrap up, or as we wrap up, I know that you guys have put a lot of time and a lot of effort and energy into creating a resource having to do with phases and small groups. And tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So over the course of the last year, we've been working on a project for both teen guys and teen girls called The Art of Group Talk. And it's just helping a volunteer in your ministry figure out how to host a conversation with a teenager. And after actually finishing and publishing the book, we took a step back and realized that we wrote a book acting almost as if 11-year-olds and 18-year-olds were in the same category and that a leader could approach them the same way. And we actually decided to go back and do some rewriting, do some rethinking, which is what we do best around here. And we've spent the last maybe 3 or 4 months really discovering what's different about a conversation with a middle schooler versus a high schooler. Basically, everything Ashley has said about middle schoolers has surprised me.
I'll tell you, in the rewrite, Crystal and I laughed so hard through the process. Like, there were footnotes in the draft. This didn't make it to the final cut, but it was like at one point, Crystal shared something about a high school, and I started a slow clap in the footnotes, and she did a salute to middle school leaders.
I just can't believe that's a real thing that happens in conversations.
Multiple times, Crystal will be like, middle schoolers do that.
That's hilarious. I love it. That's
I think at the end of it, we really feel like it may be a even more helpful resource for your volunteers in your ministry. And I think the Art of Group Talk for teenage boys is in the same process as well. Is that true?
Yeah, we're in the middle of that. And we're looking at your notes because they're so good.
And funny.
And we're adorable.
They're so good. And
thank you so much, Chef.
Yeah. And so, we're redoing that as well. And it's just, we could have a resource for every age almost, but to split it up at least into these phases gives us the opportunity to equip our volunteers so that they feel successful, that they are effective, to do the same for parents. And so that's what we're after.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for joining us for the Rethinking Youth Ministry podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, we would love for you to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and leave a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. Your review will help make this podcast better. And finally, for more great resources, check out the show notes for this episode. And to learn more about the student curriculum and strategy we're all a part of at Orange, visit our website, rethinkingym.org. Until next time, I'm Sarah.
I'm Ashley.
I am Chef.
And I'm Crystal.
And thank you guys for listening.